so much for joining us today for this really special edition of Suitable Conversations at Sunder Nursery, which is looking its flowery, romantic best in this lovely springtime. This is also the last session of Suitable Conversations for this season. This conversation, the grand finale of the season, is about Sunder Nursery itself. In just 3 or 4 years, this has become Delhi's favorite park. What is its history, environment, and development? Today, we will find out. Ratish Nanda and Gillian Wright are the very best possible discussions to illuminate how this came to be. Ratish Nanda is a conservation architect and India CEO for the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, or AKTC, which is presently undertaking 2 major conservation projects, the Nizamuddin Urban Renewal Initiative, Delhi, and the Qutb Shahi Heritage Park Conservation in Hyderabad. Ratish was earlier responsible for the Baghe Babur restoration in Kabul, and nearer home, the garden restoration of Humayun's tomb. His major publications include Delhi, the Built Heritage, and Rethinking Conservation, Humayun's tomb. Gillian Wright is an author and translator and has in fact translated the legendary Rag Darbari by Sri Lal Shukla, and she has a deep interest in South Asia culture, history, and biodiversity. She is an avid birder, regularly recording birds seen in Sunder Nursery, and has also documented butterflies and dragonflies there. She is working on a book on the history of the Nizamuddin locality and has contributed to a forthcoming book on Sunder Nursery. So, Ratish, Gillian.
Please.
Lovely to be here at the only place in Delhi I know, and the only venue where you can be upstaged by peacocks. And I'm very happy that they've been already dancing, and I hope they dance a bit more over the next hour or so. Patta patta boota boota haal hamara jaane hain, jaane na jaane gul hi na jaane, baat to sara jaane hain. These words of Mir remind us that for lots of the richness of images of the garden in Indian literature, and the garden stands for the world, and the rose for the beloved, and not mentioned here, the bulbul, the bird, is the lover. And when I started learning Urdu poetry many, many years ago, I soon realized that gardens were an intrinsic and very important part of Indian cultural life and history. And we have many historic gardens in Delhi, and some left in remnants, and some we only have the names. But there is only one of today's Delhi's many gardens of today, which is actually also known as a nursery. And before we go forward, I'd just like to speak a bit about its first avatar post-independence, and then over to you. The first avatar post-independence of the Sunder Nursery was in about 75 years ago. And now if we cast our mind back, at that stage there were hardly any trees here. There was no zoo. There was no Nizamuddin East, Nizamuddin West. The Mathura Road was a little lane. And from the gate of Sunder Nursery, which you still come in from that side today, you could see the walls of a Purana Killa, of the old fort. And this was a time when Delhi, after independence, was suddenly expanding because of the influx of refugees. In 10 years, between 1941 and 1951, Delhi's population doubled. 1 in 4 people were refugees, mainly for West Punjab. And, but even so, when it was doubled, think how many people we are today. It was only 1.7 million people. But still, there were new colonies to be laid out, new colonies for the refugees. There were avenues to be laid out, there were trees, there were hedges, there was greening to be done to make these new areas habitable. And in comes, at this stage, a man who was an absolute fanatic, I could say, for plants. And his name was Alec Percy Lancaster. And he came from generations of horticulturalists. And because of what he wrote, we get glimpses of Sunder Nursery in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And he decided to get everybody in Delhi gardening. He wanted to make gardeners out of everybody who had a patch of land. And he started a monthly bulletin called Garden Chat. And in Garden Chat, he also described Sunder Nursery. And it was monthly because you say in March you do this, in April you do this, and everything like this. So he describes the empty landscape, the views, the aesthetic beauty of the place, because you had the monuments and you had the beautiful Sundar Burj, and he looked at the Sundar Mahal, and being a horticulturist, he thought this is a good place to experiment with seed potatoes. And he kept them from over from one season to the other, and none of them rotted. So this was his open-air laboratory. And in those days, the Sunder Nursery was very ambitious. If you had a wedding, you could get your flowers from Sunder Nursery for the wedding. If you wanted vegetables also, you just didn't get seeds and you just didn't get seedlings. You could buy your vegetables, and the price of onions at that stage was about 15 paisa a kilo. So this was the man who actually developed in a big way Sunder Nursery. But when he left, and he was the last Englishman to be direct in charge of horticulture in the government of India. After he left, over the decades, Sunder Nursery became a very, very sleepy place. And when I first came to walk in it in the 1980s and to buy my plants here, as perhaps some of you seated here also did, only about 10% of it was used as a very small percent of it was used as a nursery, and the rest of it was left to its own devices. And although I walked here many times, and I came here especially in the monsoon to look at snakes, because there were lots of snakes, I never went as far as this. I didn't know this existed, and I was absolutely gobsmacked when I came in, because even during all the development of the Sunder Nursery, it was never closed, so you could pretend you were going to buy a plant and always come in. And found the what we now know as India Gate, the Great Arch, and the Lakka Burj. This was entirely unknown territory, and I think very few people actually came to see it. And this was then the first avatar post-independence of the Sunder Nursery. And then we enter Ratish Nanda and company and the Aga Khan Foundation. And I have been literally following your teams around from monument and monument and dig. And how did it come to take its second avatar?
Thank you, Gillian. It's interesting that you highlight this building, and it reminded me of the 12th of July, 2007. So we really signed this agreement with the Archaeological Survey of India, the Municipal Corporation of Delhi, and the Central Public Works Department, who sort of had control on this land, on 11th of July 2007. And on the 12th of July, we had no bank accounts, we had no team, and we started conserving or restoring this monument. I had before then done the inventory of historic buildings for intact, and this doesn't feature in that list because, as you said, it was inaccessible. So it was found quite by chance, with sort of the roof gone and all the, like most of the monuments in Sunder Nursery, in this whole zone, almost everything that could be removed for the antique market had been removed. So all of the sandstone that you see on the roof and the jalis was all missing. And what was the hurry? What was the hurry that of all the 70 buildings that we've restored or conserved in this area, what is the hurry for us to really, even using our own money, using our own resources, to start work within sort of literally 10 hours of signing an MOU? The hurry was that this building was going to be demolished. At that point, there was a proposal to build a national highway, which was funnily called the Tunnel Road, right through 70 meters wide, right through Sunder Nursery, ending at the Subs Burj roundabout. it would have gotten 12,000 cars from across the road into Sabzburg every hour. And this was a ruin, so it was considered easy to demolish. And that was the reason we started on this, and that road has today become the Barapula highway. But going back to your question, how did it start? It did start with in 2004, Dr. Manmohan Singh, who was then Prime Minister of India, but also Culture Minister. He held the Culture Minister portfolio. He requested His Highness the Aga Khan, the late His Highness the Aga Khan, to do more work in the field of culture on the public-private partnership mode. And the late Aga Khan was for 40 years leveraging cultural assets for improving quality of life. And we started discussion almost immediately, and by sort of January, 3 months later, the government of India had offered us a list of 50 potential sites to work on. We looked at that till for 6 months, and then decided that none of those worked for us, and we needed to do a Aga Khan Trust for Culture urban conservation project in this area for 3 reasons. But what we were looking for, in line with our work in the Al-Azhar Park in Cairo and other international sites, what we were looking for is really a grand archaeological site, which we had in Humayun's tomb, and as I said, 60, 70 other monuments that we've been able to fix in this area. But we also wanted, as part of the Aga Khan Development Network, to demonstrate how culture, heritage can be leveraged for social economic development. So we were definitely looking for a site to which a community was deeply attached. And surprise, surprise, none of those 50 sites except Bidar, to an extent, had that community heritage site linkage. And we realized that we could demonstrate how conservation and social development could go hand in hand. But we were also looking for a park. We just finished working and creating the Al-Azhar Park in Cairo, which, by the way, attracts more visitors than the pyramids. And this site gave us the option of doing all those 3. I mean, it was His Highness the Aga Khan's great vision, great commitment that we signed off on this mega project, which over the last 15, 20 years, we've, you're familiar with work, but also created this city park that last year saw 1.2 million visitors.
I think you're making it, you've made light of the way you stopped the road, actually, because that wasn't that easy, was it? And that would have made it all impossible. It wasn't just mending one monument.
Yeah, the road, all over the world, highways are being dismantled. Highways in the city centers are being dismantled. Yet here we are in India, where PWD engineers had convinced the powers that be that this 10,000 crore project would be the absolute necessity to hold the Commonwealth Games here. No, it was a big fight. It was a big fight. But what would have happened had the road come in? It was not only that Humayun's tomb would have been inaccessible, but also we were looking at cutting 5,000 trees across the road. We were thinking of, it would have required demolishing at least 4 or 5 major monuments, including this one. It would have, they were lowering the road into the ground, and the vibrations, you can just imagine what the zoo would have been like. So there were all sorts of issues, but I think it was the fight to stop that road became a fight for many people, and that is why we won it. It was lots of different groups, trees, animals, RWAs, all came together.
Yeah, and it wasn't the last fight by any means that you had to fight. I remember for many years, and I expect some of you who have lived in Nizamuddin in this area for some time remember how the Bara Batasha Wala and the Chota Batasha Wala on that side were inaccessible for ordinary people. And I think the English word is encroachment, but I think the Hindi word kabza is much more apparent, is much more apt. That basically it was in hands of people who had just got hold of it illegally and were not leaving it. And I think that one of the longest and biggest struggles you had to fight was also to get to release. I think in the end, nearly 20 acres of land were released. I mean, which is a legal struggle, which is not an easy one by any means.
So, you know, if you look at the Sunder Nursery, the landscape master plan was designed by Professor Muhammad Shahi, and incredible design that you see today. But the road that is now, because Sunder Nursery is landlocked, and the only way Shahid Saab could address that issue was to create this peripheral road that today allows people to park right here, and so makes almost all of Sunder Nursery much more usable. But we did dismantle 22,000 square meters of road. But what I'm trying to say is that the road today divides Sunder Nursery and this whole parcel of land, because we never thought we'll win that one. I mean, yes, it was a long struggle, and but one makes light of this because we won them. There are lots of struggles we've sort of lost. But yeah, I mean, the whole area was really in 1989 given on a 6-month lease to Bharat Scouts and Guides, so the Boy Scouts of India. And Intact ran from here for many years, but it was only in 2010 or something that we were able to recover the land. And yes, it was a long struggle. It was I mean, I don't want to but we needed to demolish over 100 buildings.
To do it overnight, more or less, no?
Well, there was on one Thursday afternoon, the stay order in the court was vacated, and it was 3-4 o'clock when I got that call from the lawyer saying the stay order has been vacated, and he would have got a stay order in a higher court the next morning. So we waited till 5:36 by the time the courts had closed, and then we rented in one night. We were able to rent about 13 machines to really knock down about 100 buildings. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And I'm very grateful you did, because otherwise none of us would be walking in Batashawala, and we wouldn't have access either to this unknown tomb. Now, you mentioned Bashir Saab and Shahid Saab, and he's no longer, unfortunately, with us. Those who walk regularly here may notice by the amphitheater there is the most beautiful of the many heritage benches that Ratish has collected. Has a little tamarind tree over it and a sign in memory of Shahid Saab. But he really was a force behind this nursery. And because he's not here himself anymore to talk about what he did, perhaps you could talk for him.
Very difficult. He was the master. But I think I mean, we at the Aga Khan Trust for Culture have had the good fortune of having him worked with him on many gardens, including the Baghe Babur and Humayun's tomb and the Qutb Shahi tombs. And I mean, even though he was the force, I mean, his character was such that you would never, use that word in his context.
He was a very quiet, softly spoken gentleman.
Incredible man, yeah. But he was, his understanding was incredibly deep, and I think from the onset, what was clear to him was that at Sunder Nursery there was need for ecology, there was need for heritage, and there was need for nursery function. So there was forest, park, and nursery. And how he integrated in the landscape design several spaces. I mean, just look at what we're sitting in today. And there are several of these which over the last 6-7 years that we've been trying to manage Sunder Nursery, we've been able to use. And I mean, it's so unfortunate that in today's world we tend to brag that, oh, to create Sunder Nursery we needed to cut not a single tree, but I mean, for somebody like Shahi sir, that would be an absolute. You won't even consider that to accommodate a new design. We cut a tree, whatever it is. And I think the reason Sunder Nursery is today 1 point whatever million people, and for a new destination that's a lot, is both because of the landscape design that has brought the highest quality of landscape accessible to everybody, and also the effort at managing the site that some of my colleagues have put in over the years to make sure the site is managed, maintained the way it was designed, and feels green, feels clean, and feels secure. Yeah.
I'm glad you used the word access. My partner moves around in a wheelchair, and I think that this is one of the few places in Delhi where there is proper wheelchair access, and you can get to most parts of the park in a wheelchair. I've also found people here who have sight, who cannot see very well, who cannot see hardly at all, walking around and feeling the barks of the trees and things. It's a very, very accessible place for all people. And for many, many people remember COVID, remember when we were coming out of COVID, remember all the sort of feelings, the mental health problems so many of us has. There's a grey hornbill up there, 2 grey hornbills up there. That this has been a place for solace and for regaining a sense of peace. And I feel this not only from my own personal experience, to deal with the trials and tribulations of life, to come especially to the woodland spaces, but also I find so many people who I meet here who are doing exactly the same thing. And I think that accessibility and welcomeness and sense of safety is really, really something special. And the care in which things have been done. Now, you mentioned your road. No? Every time I see your peripheral road, I think of the top of Humayun's tomb, because that's where the concrete came from. Isn't it?
So, amongst many things, Sunder Nursery, the creation of Sunder Nursery was also a zero waste project. And it's coupled with the conservation of Humayun's tomb and many other buildings. But also, Gillian, the last 10 odd years before we started, this had become a Malba dumping ground. So it was construction rubble that was really dumped here. Even that we did not take out. So the 1 million kilos of concrete that we removed from the roof of Humayun's tomb was really used to, what Gillian is referring to, is level the road, the peripheral road, vehicular road. And some of you have seen the amphitheater. That is all made out of brick, stone brick, which is the leftover of sandstone blocks that were used for the conservation and the landscape. But what we're really proud of, besides the 300 tree species of 25,000 trees, is what we've been able to demonstrate here with rainwater harvesting. By collecting every drop across 200 acres, including Humayun's tomb, the water table in some portions of Sunder Nursery is today at 1.6 meters depth. And that demonstrates, and the reason we do all of this work anywhere is to demonstrate what is possible. It demonstrates that how even in a small area, by just collecting every drop, the water table goes up. We found 12 Mughal era dug wells here, each of which we were found filled up. We went down 34 to 42 feet. And each of these are full of water today.
I remember the one that was on the corner of Batashawala, and it was completely underground.
Yeah.
It was completely underground, and it comes up and it's shaped like a wheel. Salam, salam, salam. And also, this sort of thing enables you to run your water bodies. And what, I've spoken to many people when I've been describing to them, why you don't feed the ducks here. And they say, but how can the wild birds manage here because the water will not be suitable for them? And I have to say, you've got 3 different self-contained water systems here. You have the ornamental one, you have the one which is aerated with fountains, and you have the one which is basically you have put in a lot of very tagda fish that feed on algae. And who thought of doing this?
So I think Gillian knows more about Sunder Nursery than possibly some of us. I get to know some things about Sunder Nursery through her, which is lovely that people like herself make this home. But yes, I think again it was I'm sure Shahir Saab, who the water bodies are all connected to each other physically, visually. So visually and on the plan you see all of them are connected, but they're treated, they're physically apart, and the water from one to the other doesn't mix. So one water body has no concrete base, the rivulets and all of that. So you got earth, and you as a result have a lot of birds that nest on water.
Oh, and you have the dragonflies, because as you know, dragonflies are very, very beautiful. And I counted the dragonflies. I've photographed 22 species of dragon and damselflies in Sunder Nursery. And I'm sure there are more. These are the ones I have seen. But most of their life, they're nymphs. They're in the water. They're in the mud. So that mud bottom is really, really important. We wouldn't have the dragonflies if we didn't have that.
It was, thank you. And that demonstrates how sort of nature just needs that, and the peacocks demonstrates how the nature just needs a little bit of encouragement to recover, as people know. But yeah, so they're treated differently. The lake is more decorated, but all of these water bodies, we mostly drain the water away before monsoon, so they serve to really collect rainwater. And each of them has now developed its own ecosystem. I mean, I'm fascinated that grebes are nesting on the water of the big lake, which is one of those few things that we were originally planning to treat with chlorine and so on. But with
luckily you haven't. And we've had generally 2 every season. We have generally 2 pairs of grebes, because they're very aggressively territorial. These are the little grebes or dab chicks, which are very small birds which dive, very, very good at diving. And they have little white spots here and a lovely red neck. And the ones in the big pond like to actually nest, and they build a floating nest right underneath one of the fountains. So you have these wonderful scenes of them sitting there covered with the drops of water from the fountains, and their babies sit on their backs a lot of the time for protection. And so you see them with their little heads sitting out. And we have had several years now of successful breeding of grebes there, and a couple of years in opposite the Karnataka Cafe. There are some, there are natural predators here, so not everything survives, but, we've done pretty damn well, I think, on that one. And then we have our ducks also. And the ducks are confusing me dreadfully this year because of climate change. Basically, in the middle of December, there weren't many ducks.
What she means is they started making babies too soon.
Far too soon, and they didn't survive. Because, that's the other thing when you have a place like this. In the end, you've got to start considering now what's going to happen in 20 years. Because in the beginning of December, we had very, very heavy rain. And the middle of January, we had ducklings. And we had ducklings because heavy rain is a trigger for spot-billed ducks, who are very cute, but they're not that brainy, to breed. And because it was out of sync, most of these ducklings very quickly, the crows attacked them and they managed to finish them off. And so this is just one example. I mean, we can see lots of around us, one example of how climate change is affecting us. But to go back to the rebuilding, we've looked at the what about the craftsmen? Because I think the other thing that was really fun over the 15 years you were working is going every day to find out what you were digging up and what you were repairing. And that was a huge job also.
Yeah, it was a journey which was based on archaeology, on research, but also keeping the political balance between what the ASI wanted and what the CPWD would permit. The wall that we're sitting on was a discovery, and this wall is really the garden enclosure wall of that building. And there are walls which came up which we could never figure out what they belong to, because obviously whatever they belong to is since gone.
Since gone, I think probably Mr. Percy Lancaster and his enthusiasm destroyed a lot of things which were under the ground then.
Yeah. And there is a collapsed dome which I've been meaning to sort of highlight, to say what happens to heritage when you don't care for it. We're yet to do that near the children's dome. There's a whole collapsed dome in the ground. Something that Gillian hasn't seen, so yay. But this whole dome sits on the ground. It's a whole collapsed dome sitting on the ground. But also, I think what has been really meaningful for us to do is that Sunder Nursery has something of interest for a very, very diverse group of, I think the peacock wants to join the conversation here, but diverse, so you have, one of the reasons you have these peacocks is that when we started clearing large areas, we felt that we were going to destroy peacock habitat. So we've got about 5 acres of land which is totally enclosed, which no humans and no dogs can get to, which encourages significant peacock populations here. But similarly, we're looking at this whole zone as a children's zone of discovery. So you've got a butterfly garden, you've got the dragonfly zone, you've got honeybees. We're together with other partners doing a lot of, like Golden Hive Foundation, doing a lot of work planting for bees. The value, the first time we said we'll do something with bees, this lady who said, now if you're talking about bees, I feel very nervous of coming to Sunder Nursery, there are bees. And here Gillian's talking about snakes, so shush, Gillian. But yeah, so I think, that has happened with partnership. We've got Bijom who are doing here organic farming and
I have to say the organic farm at the end of, which is the model farm at the back here, at the end of the monsoon, it's also one of the few places you can go and see dancing jugnu, fireflies. It's lovely like that. And I saw a couple of days there, I saw my first painted lady butterfly of the season, and these are migratory butterflies, and it was hanging out. It was hanging out there as well. So you're doing the garden. What was the other thing you said? The bees. The bees here. I didn't know anything about bees, but at least 5 species. There's a blue-banded bee. Has anyone here seen blue-banded bees? Yes, aren't they splendid? They have electric blue, they're solitary bees with electric blue coloring to them, and they are really beautiful. You only see 1 or 2, and you think you've seen something in a dream. There are the rock bees, and the honeybees, and the stingless bees, and the carpenter bees.
Yeah, I think the key point with us bees is gendered awareness. So Mr. Rakesh Gupta of Golden Hive comes thrice a month from Lucknow, talks to school children and college students and makes them aware. And I think that is a role Sunder Nursery must play.
Absolutely.
And Sunder Nursery, we also have a lot of cultural events. We also have large Sufi festivals and so on. And what I find amusing is that there's some people who come here for the bees and butterflies. There are other people who come here for the art. There are other people who come for the monuments, and some people for the culture. But there is zero tolerance for people with other interests. So we get mixed up in this. People complaining, oh, why is that program happening? It's too loud. Or why is why is this place not clean and why is it not grassed, and so it's that has been one of our big challenges, to explain to people that there is in an urban park which is 90 acres and a legally called a district park, there is the need and the possibility to have something for everyone.
Yes, and if you do one thing for bees, I can say you're also doing something for birds. I think this is one of the few parts. I've been watching the bees, and the bees go mad more than anything else. You're also planting single dahlias rather than double dahlias because they're much better for insects. But the bees go mad after poppies, and they go mad after mustard. And the mustard also attracts the birds. So without meaning to, you create a bird corridor on the edge of the vista. On the one side, you have the mother bougainvillea bushes of the CPWD, and then you have citrus, and then you have mustard, and then you have the vista, which incidentally is basically on the line of the old Grand Trunk Road to Lahore, and actually points on the other side of Azimganj Sarai to a Qos Minar, one of the markers on the road. And in this corridor, I found blue throat, I found Siberian bush chat, I found lots of munias, and where our resident, winter resident, black redstarts hangs out. Yeah. So that's the hornbills are really competing with us and competing with the peacocks. Now, this little bird, which has a little grey head and black hair and orange and trembles its tail, is still here. I saw it 2 days ago. It moved out of the sun. It was on the other side. But it's still here, and it's going to make its way all the way through to Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan and towards Mongolia. Now, I think also we have to think, when we're thinking of doing things for birds, can we talk a bit about birds now? Because I know you love birds.
Yeah, so the effort with the birds is done purposely, because birds, kept my own sanity alive while we were doing this for many years. But birds need different habitats, and we've got bogged down with far too much. So it's not all there. One would love, to create mud banks for burrowing birds. But we do have now 171 bird species. Spotted a common kingfisher, which is not common at all, last week. And
I've never seen a common kingfisher here, so I'm very jealous.
And I called Gillian immediately and said, I've seen a common kingfisher. And she said, add it on eBird, which I haven't done yet. But 171 bird species, one thought maybe we'll get to 100 someday, but 171. And now I think the next challenge we need to do together with the BNHS or Gimme Trees Trust or whatever is somehow get the house sparrow back. And I don't know what we can do about it, but we have no house sparrows. It drives me absolutely insane. We've put in hundreds of nest boxes. We've got all of this wilderness, but we don't have a house sparrow yet. I thought I spotted one. I might have, but we don't have house sparrows.
There were a couple coming over from the zoo.
Okay, well,
but they went back again.
We have to keep them here.
I think also when we talking about birds, I think it's the wonderful thing is the seasonality of birds. And we can talk a little perhaps about migration, because this is the time when birds are going back. And there is a huge migration of tiny, tiny birds from the Siberian, Russian, Stan region that come down into the forests and gardens of India. And they eat insects, and they basically part of the, what's the name of it? Eco-services. They service our forests, they eat unnecessary insects, they keep a balance. And here we have several sorts of warblers, we have whitethroats, and we have, which come from long, long distances, and we have in the monsoon season we have the pied cuckoo, which comes from Africa, and we have smaller distance migrants, beautiful flycatchers, like the canary flyfletcher, which is grey and green.
Or the ultramarine.
Or the ultramarine, which you see. There are a lot of things passing through.
And the ultramarine flycatcher I emphasize only because it's the only spotting ever in Delhi. And, so one bird probably stopped by here and I had good fortune of seeing it twice.
You can see also very unusual things going through, like I have seen here crested serpent eagle. And this year we have things which are basically should be living around here, but you don't see very often. Like the oriental honey buzzard, which are big birds and very impressive birds. And birds that come from the hills like the ashy drongo, which eat the rock bees, which are feeding on the eucalyptus flowers. Because there's a hunger season for bees. And during the hunger season, some of these exotics, which have come from other places, they flower. And one of them is the eucalyptus. And when nothing much is is flowering, the eucalyptus is flowering. And so the bees come to the eucalyptus, and next to the bees sit the green bee eaters and the ashy drongos who come down from the hills with the big red eyes and their balletic flight, and they eat the bees. So you have all these webs of life going on. And we have to pay attention to migrants, because there has been just recently another meeting of the UN Convention on Migratory Species, for which India is a signatory. And it's come up with this very depressing figure, that if you look at the population of all migratory species, and that includes everything from elephants to bumblebees, the average decline over the last 50 years is 73%. So that's why when we have these migrant species here, we have to think and make sure that we are providing things as far as we can for them. These are shared species, shared with other countries in the world, as we share our weather with other countries in the world.
Sorry, I was trying to protect the peacock.
I think the peacock is well aware of what's happening. Now we've done the waters and the wells, and we've done the Kabza, and yes, and there's what's left for you to do. You've still got some things to do, haven't you?
I think so. I think what has been absolutely, what we're trying to demonstrate in say the Aga Khan Trust for Culture, creating this park rather than the DDA or any other government agency. Is because His Highness the Aga Khans always believed that we work together with government to fulfill objectives, urban objectives. Usko chhod dijiye, please. Excuse me. Please leave the bird alone. And that sort of message continues with the post-project management. And I think we ask, seek, or get not a single penny from any government towards managing Sunder Nursery. And that was also a new sort of post-project management model.
I remember also when they started being ticketing, and when it opened, and a lot of people, especially very rich people, said, "I'm not going to pay. How disgusting."
Yeah, somehow the problem was only with the very rich people. But I think we've had all sorts of people. We've had people saying, put the ticket at 1,000 rupees. And that's also because people like exclusive things. But the ticket is subsidized. But what it does is it does many things. It gives people a respect for the site. It value their time here. But we've had to innovate, and we do all sorts of things to raise money. We've been putting in our own money up till recently, till this year, in fact. And we've still kept it off any private sort of events. We've made sure that we have never more than one of the reasons we have to miss suitable conversation some weekend is because there are lots of other conversations happening here or events, and we tend to limit the number of events here. But I think that is also very important. What we're doing now in terms of managing this site is also a very important lesson for India, where rather than cribbing about the lack of maintenance of our urban spaces, RWAs, corporates, academia, other sort of agencies need to follow this model and start doing something really significant for the general urban space, not only urban parks. And yes, we're not finished. We've just opened the museum, which I'm sure many of you would have seen, which serves as a bridge, underground bridge between Sunder Nursery and Humayun's tomb. I know my mother hasn't seen it, so I'll take her there one day. But we're also, we're also planning to build at the corner of Sunder Nursery, and we've just received the pledge of funding from one of our donors for this, a garden house which will display tropical flora and desert flora in Delhi. Now you go to Kew Gardens in London and New York, and you can see plants from the northeast and Kerala, but you can't see it in Delhi. So I think that will become a big magnet for children to get interested. You know, it's a magnet kind of building in this whole zone, but also in plants more generally.
I must say that one of the pleasures here is the heritage trees, because you have planted so many native trees, so many native species, including a beautiful Anjan tree just behind us, which is one of the most delicate ones. But we also have the heritage trees left from before. So we can go and see Brazil ironwood and imagine we're in South America. We can stand under the African wattle tree, which basically it flowers. It's in the tree section. It flowers for months. It has these beautiful, beautiful yellow flowers. And imagine you're in Africa. There's a huge mahogany tree, and there are trees actually from the northeastern forest. And there's one because you move the pavements because you think you should have pavements. So one or two of the nursery trees are now exiles. And one of them is a forest tree called Banaranga. And so it's still, I go and hug it occasionally.
And the reason those trees are there is a very important part of Sunder Nursery's history. It was, the park was first created, or not the park, the Sunder Nursery, so to speak, was fenced off. A lot of these buildings really date from the 16th, 17th century. And for many years, these were tomb gardens. And then it was in the beginning of the 20th century that this nursery was created to propagate plants and trees that were eventually used in the British capital of New Delhi. So the British, in the first instance, wanted to plant New Delhi with trees brought in from New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa. So we have about a dozen trees in this garden that are the only one species available in the whole country.
Yeah, and there's this, what's it called? Not cocoa tree, not cocoa, but the one which is from South America. I remember its name later. But lots of very interesting trees. And the other thing I like about the woodland, we're running out of time actually, aren't we? I think we are. No, but he has his third talk of the day, I think. So when do you have to run, Ratish? And one of the good things about the woodland is that you've made bug hotels around that's basically for kids. This whole area is a bug hotel. And when trees fall, or bits of trees fall, they're left to remain. I think you might have seen in the Great Arch, there is a kika tree which fell down and then was allowed to stand on its branches, so sort of like, and then after that, the restoration of the Great Arch, the India Gate Arch here, was done so that the tops of the arches were replaced. And so you have this amazing tree sticking out. It's still alive. It's still a kika tree. It's pruned every year, and people can basically play over it because everyone needs to climb a tree. I mean, sooner or later, everybody needs to climb a tree. And at the back here, there's a big neem tree. And there was a storm. A huge bit of it fell over, but they didn't go in with the saw, and they didn't take that fallen over bit. And the result was that two of these grey hornbills decided to make it a nest. And because it was directly under the path, this is the longest I have ever observed the nest of a grey hornbill. And the young is inside the bole of the tree, and it's talking. And my goodness, it's noisy because it demands its food. And its parents come and they regurgitate figs mainly, and they feed. One of the male comes and the female comes, one after the other, and they feed the young. And after they go away, the young keeps on making a hell of a noise. And so there is no doubt where this bird is. And it's the one, generally last year I found 3 hornbills nests here. But this one was the only one when I was actually there when it came out. And I saw it fly over here. And it was typical adolescent. It did half this sort of screeching noise that we've been hearing and half the begging noise. And both its parents were in attendance. And it's that sort of thing, leaving old trees for bugs, for barbettes to make their nests, for flamebacks, for woodpeckers to make their nests. That makes this special. And we have lots of nesting birds here, including golden orioles. I don't know, anybody here knows what a golden oriole is? Only 2 people. A golden oriole is like a drop of sun. It's this big, it has a red bill, it has a bit of black. They're the most glorious birds that you can imagine. They come here and they have very particular nesting requirements. They need to nest at a particular height over water, and they need to nest in the company of drongo crows, which are these black birds with the tail that goes like this, the forked tail. And here, 2 years running, we had successful breeding of golden orioles. And then the last year, unfortunately, the crows got the babies because they're like that only. So these are the sort of breeding birds we have. And there are many others besides, no?
So Gillian never tells you when the golden oriole is nesting and where it is, Next year, Hardeep, just make sure you ask her every day.
Now, what I tend to do is go for about 5 minutes in the morning, look in the opposite direction, pretend I'm not looking at the nest so the crows don't see, hide under a tree, and allow myself 5 minutes to observe what they're bringing to nest, how often they come and feed the young. And that's it.
It's the most beautiful bird, and it's a pity only 2 people know about it. One is an environmentalist, and the other is married to me. So I think a lot more of you should see the golden oriole.
Do have a look more at when you're walking and look up. Yeah. Look up, see what you can see in the trees. Look for the green pigeons. There are lots of green pigeons, and they're in love at the moment. They're all going around in twos, and they will make the most rudimentary and pathetic nests, and then sit in them. And very often they sit pretty low. So you can see them, and there's nothing as pretty as a green pigeon, a yellow-legged green pigeon. It has yellow and green in all shades. Right, I think, are we allowed questions?
Yes, please.
Right, would there be any questions from anyone? Yes, sir, at the back.
I've just noticed that Yogesh is sitting in the thing. Yogesh, please stand up. Yogesh has been a partner of Shahi Saab for many years and has continued the work over here, which we're very grateful for, as the landscape design. Thank you.
Hello. It's fascinating hearing about how the park has come up and Shahi Saab's contribution, etc. But now, just wondering about in terms of me, what are the challenges that you're actually facing, especially in terms of finance, and you're saying that you're still putting your own money, and how sustainable is that? And also, you must have entered into an agreement with the government, and how long is that for? And how will that carry on later?
Yes, thank you, sir. Actually, one of the first, in fact, I think clause number 1 of our 2007 MOU talks about creating a post-project system. From our experience across 30 countries, we know that creating a garden is the easy bit. It's 50% effort, but it's the easy bit effort. It's to sustain that is critical. In this case, we really signed the agreement in 1997, and by 98, 99, my bosses were breathing down my neck to start negotiating a post-project management. I'm glad they did that because it took us about 10 years to get agreement from the Archaeological Survey of India, the Ministry of Culture, the CPWD, the Ministry of Urban Development, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of External Affairs, 3 divisions of the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Law, and finally the Prime Minister's Office to agree on a post-project management. So we serve as managing trustees to the Government Sunder Nursery Management Trust, which is chaired by the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Urban Development, and includes the Director General CPWD, the Director General ASI, the Commissioner MCD, and the Deputy Director General Horticulture of the CPWD amongst the trustees. So it's taken us 10 years to set it, so I'm quite proud of it because it's really an important reference for the future. Well, challenges are every day. I have my colleague Hardeep sitting in the back who operates Sunder Nursery, and I think collectively it's the same level of balance that we need to maintain to ensure that the park is a place for diverse interests, flora, fauna, all of that. Our agreement really takes us till the end of 2028, and in terms of financial sustainability, we actually broke even because we're trying to break even on operation costs only. The money that was spent in creating Sunder Nursery, half of the infrastructure below ground and all of that, was always a gift of His Highness the Aga Khan. We had a grant from several grants from the US Ambassador's Fund for Cultural Preservation, and we also had a one-off grant from the Norwegians. But all of that was grant. But what we're trying to do is break even on operations, and we did for 1 year in the middle, I think 2 years ago, did break even. And then last year we were asked after many years of effort to also start maintaining the Humayun's tomb gardens. And we had restored, as a gift of His Highness the Aga Khan on the 50th anniversary of India's independence, we had restored the gardens. And earlier this year in July, there was a UNESCO World Heritage Committee meeting, and the gardens had to be re-restored. So we spent a lot of money that we were earning here at Humayun's tomb, and we continue to maintain the garden. So that takes away a significant chunk of our money. And but we have plans in place, including at the museum. There are places for cafes and restaurants and souvenir shops. And eventually we will start seeking grants and get friends to hold fundraising dinners and so on, but that will happen in time. But before 2028, we will definitely break even on operating costs. The next question is what happens after 2028, and your guess is as good as mine. But the good part is that the Government Sunder Nursery Management Trust cannot be dismantled. The system's in our place. We would consider it our success if we are not needed, but somebody else carries on. But what is important is this cannot be done without a civil society organization. It cannot only be done by a corporate and a funding group. You need a civil society organization, and that's what we're trying to demonstrate.
Right, I think it's nearly 5:45. Right, I think then we shall draw this afternoon to a close. Thank everybody for coming very, very much. It's been lovely to be here in this wonderful surrounding. and I hope you really, really enjoyed it.
I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Suitable Conversations, Amber, Himali, Ranjana sitting here. I think very glad that you've been doing this for the last few years in this space. It's lovely to see Sunder Nursery being used here, so thank you.